Oh my gosh. So beautiful people, wherever you are in the world, good morning, good evening, good day. Welcome to Kiko's Freethinkers Forum. This is episode 95, and I'm joined by a very special guest. And we were having our own conversation off camera. I was like, let's go on and start recording so the audience can get, in the know with what we're talking about. I present to you Cynthia McKinney, Dr. Cynthia McKinney. She received her PhD in leadership from Antioch University, located in Yellow Springs, Ohio. And
Yep.
she was 2008 Green Party nomination for U.S. President of the United States, and she was a six-time House of Representatives Congresswoman out of Georgia. She was the first Black woman to serve the House in the state of Georgia, and she's had a lot of books published. She has a newer book that we're going to discuss today. And to my surprise, this is one of the first times that this is ever going to be talked about, this information. Her latest book, which is a compilation of essays, and she edited this series of essays and contributed one essay in particular herself in chapter 11. And we're going to talk about that chapter, which is biowarfare as genocide, the development of ethnic specific viruses. And the book is When China Sneezes, from the coronavirus lockdown to the global political-economic crisis. And other books that she's published, Ain't Nothing Like Freedom, How the U.S. Creates Shithole Countries, and the list goes on. But I just want to say, Dr. McKinney, thanks for coming down to Kiko's Freethinkers Forum, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And I can't believe this is the first time, and we're so close, Tennessee, Georgia, we're so close to each other. But the first time won't be the last time. So I'm happy.
Well, I tell you what, I'm very happy to hear that. I know my audience is dying to get your words of wisdom and insight tonight and today, because I tell you, the question I get before we do a slight ad, more than any guest so far, and I've had
Mhm.
people on like Norm Finkelstein, I've had people on like Margaret Kimberly, Medea Benjamin, and the audience is curious about you, especially because I think it's because of what we were talking about before, this blackout, this information blackout. People are
Yeah.
trying their way to get rid of all the dissidents. And people keep asking me, Kiko, what is Cynthia McKinney doing? Like, I get that question so much because I tell them, like, I've been trying to reach out to interview Cynthia McKinney. And they're like, what is Cynthia McKinney up to? So I guess my first question to you would be, and for my audience to know, like, what has Cynthia McKinney been doing post Congress?
Well, I've been very busy post Congress. Yes, there is life after being targeted by the world's most powerful interest group lobby, and being basically having your political career ended because of your particular beliefs in the, what can I say, the application of human rights law, international human rights law, to all humans that are on this planet, right? So if you're a human, then international human rights law applies to you. And so therefore, I am going to champion your cause. Well, I was able to champion many causes when I was in the Congress, but I was not able to stay in the Congress while championing the cause of the Palestinians. And it was the pro-Israel lobby from both inside the US and from outside of the US that combined forces and basically selected my replacement. You talk about replacement theory. Well, you can look at me as an example of that. And they financed my replacement and then made sure that he had enough votes in order to win a stolen election. We've got some experience with stolen elections as well.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, Dr. McKinney has been doing her thing to answer the question. You're currently in Bangladesh. You teach at North South University. And because people are always asking, I'm like, obviously, do you have a computer? I'm not trying to be mean. I'm like, you can find out this stuff. I mean, it's pretty easy to find out, where
Yeah.
people are these days. And so,
And I'm very active on Twitter. So,
mhm.
I mean, you can, people can interact with me directly, even though, I don't live on Twitter. I live on Telegram now.
Okay.
So you can definitely interact with me on Telegram. I have a channel there called Target Identified. Actually, I didn't start the channel. I didn't name the channel. It was a supporter of mine who has since passed away, but he started the channel and named it because I was always, according to him, I was always right over the target. And so I didn't hesitate to name the target because, of course, if you're engaged in warfare, which is what we are engaged in, we don't know that, but there is a war that is being waged against us. And if we don't name the target, then anything, the target can be the ether, the target can be the air, the target can be over there, the target can be behind me, the target can be over there. And generally speaking, that's the way people receive it. So I will be over the target. And so over the identified target. And that's why he named that channel Target Identified. And then I have my personal channel as well. But I basically live on the Telegram channel, basically 365, 24/7. I am posting from everywhere because I go everywhere and I am curious like that. And so various health news, various war news, various politics news. I go there, and if it's interesting, I'll post it. And that's what I do on my Telegram channel. But I'm also on Patreon. I don't do enough on my Patreon. Sorry about that. Patreon. And I am on X.
Oh
They
yeah.
call it now, but everybody still calls it. I should give equal mention to Minds, Gab, Substack Notes, me, we. So, and there's another one, Truth Social. So
Yes.
I'm around, and so it's not really that difficult. You're right. If people really want to find me, it's not difficult for them to find me. I'm just not on Facebook. You notice I didn't say Facebook because I've been locked out of my Facebook channel. So I am on Facebook, and you can see up to I think about I've been locked out ever since.
And we know the reasons behind that. There's been so much of,
Yes.
you mentioned warfare. We're going to talk about biological warfare within the book's context, but in a larger context, this information warfare that we're going through. I mean,
Yes.
you have the Julian Assange, the High Court decision that's going to be coming up February 20th, February 21st in the UK High Courts. We had a panel for the fourth time on yesterday, actually. It hasn't even been published to episode 93 with Paula Iacella and Susan McLucas that represent Assange Defense Boston. And just trying to get petitions, trying to send out postcards to get this resolution, some headwinds in Congress, which only 9 people have signed off on this resolution to basically, look into the Assange case. I mean, 9 out of 455 people. And that tells you all you need to know about, where Congress is,
500, including the senators.
including the
So add
senators, well
100
over
to that.
500. So yeah,
That's
and,
right.
and dead silent people. I mean, all these so-called people, these so-called truth seekers and fighters and activists and freedom fighters. And I think Ilhan Omar, as far as the left is concerned, because a lot of my audience has left orientations, but she's the only person that's a part of this so-called squad that's actually signed off on this new resolution. And that tells you all you need to know about where people's interests are. And you talked about off camera how people been bought off. I mean, constantly,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
whether it's an Israeli lobby, whether it's a gas corporation, whether it's an environmental advocacy conflict of interest with money that deals with Chevron or any other company. It's just, it seems like money is always dirtying the waters constantly. And Congress
Yeah.
basically has just its own little social club with red tents and blue tents on it. And no other tents are allowed in there, but just those two colors.
Right.
So it's really, I mean, at the
Yes.
point, what damn difference does it make, you know, what color it is? And people are so caught up into that. But something you said there about the echo chamberization of social media, where I think people, they associate, oh gosh, Telegram. I can't look up Cynthia McKinney on Telegram because I hear there's just so many dissidents and conservatives and conspiracy theorists over there and this and I think they've done this. They've created these tunnels to where everyone is in their own lane because I have friends like that. It's like, oh, I won't even associate myself with that company. Like you hear like more and more. It's like I'll only stick to Meta. I'll only stick to Instagram. I'll only stick to this and that. But I think it goes into this way of putting people in their place in a way.
Yeah,
Like
they don't mind if we talk to each other who is like us, because they have successfully balkanized the population. So if you want to rule over a people, the strategy that really has been successful is what I teach my students in terms of the whole decolonizing process, is that we have to decolonize our minds, and our minds have been balkanized. So Gilad Atzmon writes about, in his book Being in Time, he writes about how the population has been purposely divided and then subdivided. We've got an identity for this and an identity for that. But, you know, and particularly in my leadership studies, but just in general, you know that we have many different identities and we slide in and out of identities. In the morning, we are parent. In the evening, we are child. In in the afternoon, we are teacher. So I mean, we have very many different identities, and we navigate those identities almost seamlessly if we're, you know, psychologically intact. We navigate those identities seamlessly. So the idea that because I am this, I have to be over here, and because he's that, he's got to stay over there. Um, uh, the investigative journalist Seymour Hersh, he
I
called
heard, yeah.
it stovepiping. So you stovepipe the intelligence, and that way nobody gets to see the, you know, he's explaining how the United States ended up in war against the Iraqi people. It was because a small group of people decided off-site that they wanted to benefit from the U.S. soldiers and the U.S. government paying for, U.S. taxpayers paying for this adventure over in Iraq that was going to kill millions of Iraqi citizens. And so then they fabricated, and when I say they, there are names associated with this fabrication. So the so-called intelligence was fabricated. It was so stovepiped. Nobody got a chance to see it except Dick Cheney's office, but he's already on board with the destruction, right? Because he's going to benefit. Halliburton's going to benefit. And so then the vice president's office says, yeah, this is something we need to do. Then you get the Secretary of State, Colin Powell, who did exactly as he was told, even though he knew it was a lie. If I knew it was a lie, Colin Powell knew it was a lie. You have to do is use 2 brain cells and understand they're lying. Well, anyway, so then he goes and lies in front of the United Nations, but these people get what they want. And I think in the end, I was talking about they're able to buy everybody. So I was just looking up the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. If I were going to run for office again, I would draft legislation to repeal it, because ultimately that is a charge for the United States government, not a charge for private bankers.
Wow. And why is that so important, just for my audience to kind of understand? You cited something very specific, the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Why is it so important to repeal this, in your opinion?
Well, it needs to be repealed because the people of the United States need to have control over U.S. Currency. The currency should be printed by the United States government, not international private bankers. So the international private bankers now have control over the US dollar. You show a US dollar, and that is an instrument of debt that belongs to those private bankers. So now, if you want to exercise your complete sovereignty, then you got to have sovereignty over your dollars. But they make these international bankers, that's why you have such lopsided rewards in the system today. So that if you're friends with them, or if you're family with them, or if you say, oh, I'll do whatever you say, massa, then you can get lots of those Federal Reserve notes. But if you're like me, or if you're like a free thinking person, if you're a person that's interested in exercising your sovereignty, then, well, we got to squeeze your access to those Federal Reserve notes. Well, no, we need to squeeze their access to those Federal Reserve notes. I think they've stolen quite enough already. And so now it's time for the people to be in charge. That's why I support Ellen Brown and her call for public banking. Imagine if the U.S. Postal Service, USPS, each branch of the USPS, we can go and get what do you call those notes, when you money orders. We can get money orders from them. But suppose you want to cash a check. You're left, if you're a non-banked person, you're left to usury, to super usury, to go to a check cashing place, or car title place, or all of these are super usurious. But usury should be against the law, but it's been legalized by the United States Congress. Why? Because everybody is in a chase for those Federal Reserve notes. Well, we ought to stop the chase.
That's amazing. You're the first guest that has really pointed out to that specific time period, because a lot of people like to refer to 71. Everyone goes automatically to when we got off the gold standard under Nixon. And you're going back to this is pre-depression. Like, we need to talk about 1913. And
yes,
it's interesting that no one has even came close to mentioning the Federal Reserve Act. I don't think it's ever happened, and with 95 episodes in. And we've had all types of economists on.
Well, because nobody wants to touch it. The economists, what is economics in the first place? Because the ideal economist is one who has participated in building some model that can predict future behavior. Well, the problem is that any model, I was almost an econ major for my master's, right? And the problem, I think I was in the program for several months, but everything was, with everything else being equal. But I look outside my window and nothing is equal. So now how am I going to build a model that reflects what's outside my window if the model's requirement is that everything has to be unlike what it is in the real world? So I dropped out. I dropped out of econ and went to international relations instead, because that is, I mean, you're talking about power and politics. And that is really what is sort of like foundational for trying to understand, in my opinion, for trying to understand who is doing what and who is getting what and why they're doing it and why they are getting it or not getting it.
Mm-hmm. Before we transition into talking about the book some, I want to get one more question about what attracted you to Bangladesh in particular? Like, what attracted you, I guess, initially about Bangladesh? And I'll talk a little bit more about Bangladesh within the context of the book, but I'm curious about what attracted you to Bangladesh.
Well, I was invited here to give a speech. Oh, wait a minute, that's going to make too much noise. Trying to heat up my water.
You're fine.
I was invited here to give a speech at the graduation ceremony, which they call convocations. And the Board of Trustees members were very proud of the institution that they had built, an English language private university in the capital city of Dhaka that was graduating, was just going gangbusters graduating. And their idea was that no one should have to leave their country in order to get an education, to get a world-class education. They shouldn't have to leave their country. They shouldn't, it's neo-colonial to think that you have to leave your country and go to the US or go to the UK or go anywhere where there are white people in order to get a good education. And it's almost as if if you look back at 1954, the Brown versus Board of Education decision, and I heard an interview of a teacher who said, no, we didn't care about our teaching next to white teachers or having our children sit next to white children. No, that was not the issue at all. In our minds, the issue was equal resources for us to teach our students. And you can look back, I mean, that generation, what we call the greatest generation, for other reasons, but they were the greatest generation. My parents, and they are also the generation of the civil rights movement and of the Black Pride movement, and that generation was very knowledgeable about themselves, about their backgrounds, about the history of this country, about the Constitution, things that our kids now don't know anything about. But that generation was very knowledgeable because they had very loving teachers. Their teachers loved them, and their teachers wanted them to succeed. And their teachers poured their hearts into those children that they were teaching. And they were successful because we know that at that time, around the 1950s, Black men could get jobs, and without having to go to college. They had very good paying jobs. Those jobs were good enough for them to support a family, and they could be strong men. They could be men in every sense of the word, whatever that means, like woman, like I'm a woman, whatever that means, but I'm a woman in every sense of the word. And there was dehumanization outside of our community, but inside our community, we knew basically who was doing, collaborating, who was doing that, but we had people who, in terms of class awareness, we all lived together. So yes, there were some people who were wealthy and some people who were less wealthy, some people who were downright poor, but we all lived together and we had this sense of community. Well, that was that generation. But then what happened after Brown versus Board of Education? The shift changed. And the shift came not so that there was equitable access to resources, but the resources for education were, how can I say, centralized instead of decentralized. And then you had the teacher, because the Black teachers, as this teacher that I heard interview, she said, we knew we were going to be the first ones on the chopping block. If they integrated the schools, then we were going to lose our jobs. And that's exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. So the whole civil rights movement wasn't about integration. It was about equal access to resources. Now, somehow it got shifted. And that really is, I saw a very, very, very compelling video. It's about 3 hours by a young man who goes by the name of Body Shots. And he delivers a body shot, I have to say. Basically, he starts with Frederick Douglass, before Frederick Douglass. And he goes all the way through today. And he traces how outside influences really supported certain factions within the revolutionary sort of Black movement and moderated the revolutionaries. So that we know Frederick Douglass's name, but we don't know Henry, I'm a victim of it myself. Henry McNeil Turner, we don't know his name. There are many, many more that he calls all of their names that I have heard, but these are not people of historical importance that I would know their name like that, whereas I should know their names because they, in their times, took the position that I, in my time, have taken. Mm-hmm. But I don't know them. So I guess, you know me now, but there'll be a lot of people in the future who won't know me because I have been blacked out. I have been wiped off the map. There are some people who are very experienced at wiping people off the map. And that's what we're watching now in Palestine. It's been going on for the last 50 years. It's not anything new. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that we have allowed these outside forces to wipe our heroes off the map. And we have allowed them to do that because we chase after that private international banker Federal Reserve note. So maybe we need to change that. And so what is it that people, when they sell out, what do they get? I think many people who know my story, who have followed my story, know that I was at one time very close to the first African-American United Nations ambassador. No. I can't say that. He was first in modern times. Let me say that. Well, maybe I can't say that depending on what modern times is. So let me say that he served under Jimmy Carter as United Nations ambassador, and his name is Andrew Young. Mm-hmm. And Andy just loved my revolutionary spirit. He loved it. And so he liked to think of himself as my political daddy, right? And we were close until we weren't. So what happened? Andy had made some radio spots for me, and he told me that I could use those radio spots in a subsequent campaign. And then but at that time, he didn't realize how targeted I was by the pro-Israel lobby. So Andy then announced on like the Sunday before election day that he didn't support me and that I was playing the radio spots without his permission. So it was, headline in the newspaper. And my father was so angry. He went after it was all, it had all gone down. And it was speaking at a banquet. And my dad went to the banquet in his shorts. And because, he didn't respect protocol like that. And so he went to the banquet and he yelled out from the door, because he didn't have a ticket. He yelled out, "You're a coward. You sold my daughter out, blah, blah, blah." And then I called Andy, and this is sometime afterwards, and I said, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "I didn't want to make the Jews mad."
Oh, wow.
And so he sold me out because he didn't want to make Jews angry. Okay, so then I happened to see him at the airport, at the Detroit airport. I was arriving and he was departing. His wife had the buggy, the push cart at the airport. She had a push cart full of Fendi boxes and bags, and Chanel and Ferragamo bags. And I said only one thing to him: "So that is why you sold me out." And then it became very clear to me that people, when it came to principle, very few people had principle. Even the people that we look up to have principles. When they're able to take $1, a Federal Reserve note, they'll take it and they'll stab you in the back. Needless to say, after that, I had nothing else to say to Andy, because Andy had demonstrated to me that all of the talk about principles and civil rights and, marching with Dr. King, at the end of the day, well, even Dr. King learned it, because that weekend before he went back to Memphis, you're from Tennessee, so you know this story. That weekend before, Dr. King chastised Jesse and told Jesse, "I'm not going to let you destroy the movement." But Jesse had already destroyed the movement by collaborating with the FBI. And why did Jesse do that? For those Federal Reserve notes, for access to those Federal Reserve notes. So, when Jesse's son got elected to the Congress, I stopped talking to Jesse a long time ago, and he used to challenge me. "Why'd you stop talking to me? Blah, blah, blah." But I had befriended Stephen Coakley, and I was looking at all COINTELPRO.
Mm-hmm.
And every Congressional Black Caucus, I would have a COINTELPRO hearing that featured the people who were targeted by the FBI and the CIA and local police departments. And that very last one, I had Steve Coakley there, Martin King III was there, Judge Joe Brown was there, um, not Melanson, but Phil, oh, I can't think of the names. I didn't, but I know the names, but I just can't think right now.
Mm-hmm.
But so I had everyone who played a role, and Steve Coakley was there. And I had William Pepper. I need to call him because I need to check in and find out how he's doing. But William Pepper, of course, was the family lawyer for the King family in the Jowers litigation, which, of course, the jury decided that the United States government did indeed conspire to murder Dr. King, Operation Lantern Spike being one of the military operations to track every minute of Dr. King's whereabouts for the last few hours of his life. So we have that whole history, and we know that history of betrayal and how it all came to be that we would have an incomplete revolution in African revolution, and then we had Obama to do the same thing, to play the same role that Jesse Jackson played against Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We had Obama to play that same role against people who think like me. And one university professor who's in your state just to the east of you, his name is Ricky Jones, I believe. And he teaches at University of Louisville.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
and he wrote the book, What's Wrong with Obama Mania. And in that book, there's one chapter there's a chapter entitled Black Hawks Down. And he uses my case as an example of the role of Obama in destroying people who fight for Black liberation the way that I fought for Black liberation. And I'm proud to say that I was at that time a Black Hawk, and I still am a Black Hawk, because that's a part of my dignity as a human being. And if there are international human rights laws that should apply to me, then I want them. I want my rights. And that's why I fight so hard for the rights of others, because I want my own rights as well. And I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to compromise for the Federal Reserve notes in order to have rights and deny my neighbor those same rights. But that's the game that is being played. And so some people have super rights and some people have no rights. That's not that. When Trump said the system is rigged, I understood immediately. Yeah, the system is rigged, right? And we all have been rigged. We have rigged ourselves. We have allowed ourselves to be rigged in order to be satisfied and complacent with a rigged system. Well, I was never satisfied.
And I think that's where the true rebel is, and our fellow dissidents, is when you can't be bought off. I really
Yeah.
believe that that's the. I'm kind of at that point where I know money, you have to have it for certain things, but honestly, I think
Yes.
a peace of mind is so much more important than these fiat notes that you've talked about.
Yes.
And if people can get to that point where the incentive isn't there, I believe that great things can be done, and that's when we can see that collaborative effort from humanity, that we can, really be as one, and we
That's
don't have to
right.
keep funding these military adventures like all over the world. And that people keep saying, we have these activists, and I have so much sympathy and so much respect for the activist communities, but at the same time, we know that these projects are going to continue as long as there's a money backing involved.
That's right.
And even in environmental movements, any sort of industry you can think of, the pharmaceutical industry, any sort of
Yeah.
industry, the money just darkens the waters. I mean, every single time, it never fails.
That's right. That's right. And so let's just eliminate the cause. Let's get to the root cause of the problem and eliminate that. And so that is how I arrived at this formula. Okay, well, for real liberation, this is a necessary component. And if we don't get that, then we're not liberated. We're
100%.
always on somebody else's plantation.
That's 100% correct. We've talked about that quite a bit on the forum, but coming from you, I think is gonna, have a lot more, I won't say power, but it'll resonate with people, I think, in a different way. And we need any sort of way this information can be, um, once it sticks to people in different ways, the better, the more effective, the better. Like, I don't care how it sticks as long as it sticks, because
Yeah,
there's no
yeah.
one particular formula that's going to work. You have to do it in a variety of ways. But I want to give a quick ad before we talk about the book. Kiko's Freethinkers Forum is more or less a public service forum. We're not going to ever ask you for any money, but I just asked you, if you want to subscribe for free, you will be supporting independent media, independent minds. We have an audience of 44% of the people located outside of the United States internationally. That was always the point of Kiko's Freethinkers Forum, to make it an international community forum. You can't unthink free thought. I'm just telling you to expand your mind a little bit. I don't want a dime from you, just expand your mind with a little bit of your time, and consider just the points of view that are presented on the program. I may identify a certain way. I may be from a leftist ideology originally, but I'm not stuck in that ideology. I've talked to all different types of people on the show. We talk about cultural issues, political issues, economic, whatever you can think of. So you can't really pigeonhole this program and this platform. And that was always the point. Like, we want to decategorize things, and let's talk about the issues, and let's do things together, because we have way more in common than we do different. So again, consider subscribing to independent media for free. Doesn't cost you anything at all, a dime. I'm not asking for any of your money, just simply a click. If you would be so gracious, if you like what you hear and you like some of the content in the previous 94 episodes, and this episode 95 is going to be just as great, if not better, than what we've done before. And we're just going to continue with the ball rolling and discuss this interesting book. I mean, there's so many different people you got involved in this latest book, When China Sneezes, from the coronavirus lockdown to the global political economic crisis. My question first was, the title is very enticing. And you said off the air that this is the first interview that really touches on the book, which that floored the hell out of me when you told me that. I can't believe that, because I know people have read the book. For sure, people know about the book. But how do you get such a variety of contributors and authors in the book? Alfredo de Zayas, you got Whitney Webb, you got Jack Rasmus, who's been on the show, I think 4 different times, maybe. You got Michael Hudson on there, yourself included. I mean, just so many different types of backgrounds and ideologies. How did that come about?
Well, after I finished my PhD and I was thinking about what it would take, some kind of solution for the what we were talking about earlier, the balkanization of the U.S. electorate. So, and as you just mentioned in your promo for your show, that you like people from across the political spectrum, but you see the political spectrum itself has changed. And so what was left, it used to be left versus right, but it's no longer left versus right because, and it used to be Democrat versus Republican. Now, there are some people who would like you to believe that it's left versus right and it's Democrat versus Republican, but it's not. Because at the very top of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, you have the same string pullers. And so it's one group of people sitting in a room, sitting around the table, deciding what's going to happen over here and what's going to happen over here. And they're all billionaires and they have the ability to finance it. And of course, their buddies, their cousins are over there printing the money at the Federal Reserve. So money is not an issue for them. They can buy anybody, they can buy everybody, as long as their currency is worth something. So let's devalue their currency. But so now they are sitting around this table, and then out here, outside of the room, outside of the building that houses that room, the world has turned upside down. And what used to be left is now right, because if I say I'm against the wars, the left wants the wars, but the so-called left want the wars. So what has happened is that those people sitting in the room have handpicked some people to be the left. I am the left. I'm about as far left as you can get. But what I say now is that I'm so far left that I've become right. Then there's the faux left. And the faux left are the people who have been, I think I have some great ideas, but nobody ever gave me $20 million to test my ideas. Nobody ever gave me $8 million to test my ideas. I just put on my Twitter the other day, what's his name? Cenk from the Young Turks.
Cenk Uygur. I knew exactly what you were talking about when you mentioned the money.
Yeah, I said, Cenk Uygur. Cenk is a coward because he wanted to criticize me, but he didn't have the courage to criticize me. So he gets a Black girl to do it. He's a coward and a racist too. He can criticize me just like I can call him a coward. Nobody has to be a coward. We can have discourse. But discourse is difficult after you've accepted $20 million from somebody, and then you have to do what they tell you to do. And that has polluted our political discourse. So we've got Soros money that has invaded particularly our community, because our community has been starved of dollars. And who's going to give you $6 million to run to become a district attorney? But George Soros will. Now his son, Alexander, or whatever his name is. Yeah, so Soros will, and whoever the World Economic Forum designates as the next person, Stacey Abrams was the Black person. So, Soros's son says, okay, it's Stacey. So then Stacey has access to dollars. Anybody want to run for office, you go to Stacey and she gives you her blessing. And I put on my Twitter the other day, I said, okay, for these men who are wearing dresses in front of the camera, please tell me what you're doing behind the camera. They're putting on these dresses so that they can make it in Hollywood, because the only way you can make it in trying to get those Federal Reserve notes is to prostitute yourself. You prostitute yourself in a classroom, you prostitute yourself in a in a courtroom, you prostitute yourself on the stage. But, there's a lot of prostitution going on.
Mm-hmm.
And how can the students know the real professors from the fake professors, from the purchased prostitute professors? And then what is it when everywhere you turn, everyone has become a prostitute? It wasn't just the people who were giving massages at Jeffrey Epstein's house,
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen so much that I have grown tired and weary of fake. And someone told me, I think it was Monique, the other day, I don't talk to her, but I saw a video of Monique, and she was saying she had never seen so many cowardly Black men until she went to Hollywood. And I'm saying, and I have said to myself on many occasions, I've said I've never seen so many cowardly men, period, until I got into politics.
But it makes sense. It's the same network.
It's the same network.
The same
That's
network.
right.
And I was going to say something that you were mentioning when you mentioned Soros. The crazy thing about, I believe Soros is still alive.
But yes, he's still alive. He's passed his
super old.
The leadership of his movement now, the Open Society Foundations, he's passed that to his son.
But the crazy thing about Soros is that it's almost like there's a phantom presence, but you can still feel the presence. And because I can't tell you how many people believe that he's like dead already. Like, oh, George Soros, like, who is that? Like it's something in the past. But it's like you never see interviews of George Soros, like recent interviews. You never see it.
Well, he did give a speech at
Davos,
at the World Economic Forum. He gave a speech, not this time, but last time, 2022. He gave a speech, and he's a bit feeble, but he did give a speech. And then they showed him in 2023. He was on some beach with two great, big, beautiful Black men beside him, which made me think other things. But and he's in his swimming trunks, and they are too. So okay. Bad guys have all the luck.
Oh my God. It's just it's a lot to wrap people's heads around. We talk about these ideas around the intricacy of all the power brokers around the world. And and I think my audience is pretty familiar with things like the World Economic Forum. And I don't want to go on a rant, but I know people have been bragging lately. A lot of my libertarian friends have been bragging about Javier Milei in Argentina becoming the new president. And
that's a step backwards.
And I'm just saying to myself, just why people are so gullible, I don't understand. It's like, you really believe that this is real. You believe that they're going to allow someone like that. And you hear it themselves. The libertarians can't even get 2% national support in this country, or any country for that matter. And you think all of a sudden it's organic that a country like Argentina is going to allow a fucking libertarian to be the president?
Yeah.
It's just like, what's on people's brains? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. Well, then what they ought to think about is, okay, so now, for whom is Milei a prostitute? Who is pulling his string? And what I have seen is that everybody's got some strings attached to them, and somebody's pulling them, but otherwise they get into trouble. And when they begin to say, okay, I was a fluke because I had no money and I was able to get elected. That will never happen again, But especially now that we have Justice Democrats, because they have lots of money if you qualify to be one of them. But that means that you've got lots of strings as well. And so now, and this is what Ricky Jones was talking about. The Black Hawks are the ones that don't have any strings. They're free. They're free to fly. They're free to spot who the problem is. They're free to go and rescue their brother hawk or their sister hawk from that who's trying to kill them. But if you have those strings on you, and then you say, okay, well, I'm going to take that string off. I'm going to be myself today. Then the next thing you know, your photograph is, you were on Epstein Island. You've done this. You're a pedophile. I mean, so you have to be so aware that everything is a trap. And people think, oh, I got elected. All of a sudden, I'm the most beautiful person on the planet. And it's natural that all these men want to date me. And it's natural that all these women want to date me. That's just natural. I had when I was in Congress, my chief of staff came to me huffing and puffing. He had run. He was so shocked because one of my colleagues, fellow colleague in the Congress, had held his hand. It was another man, and he was shocked. Well, it was like, everybody knows. I won't say his name. I guess I could. He's no longer around, but everybody knew he was gay. But the media covered it up. And they covered it up until he was no longer living because he was very useful for them. But you start taking those strings off and say, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to fight for my people. Jamal Bowman is a good example because he's from New York, elected, and one of the first things he did was call my name. Now, Jamal Bowman doesn't know me personally. He doesn't know me from Adam. He only knows what somebody said about me that he was told to repeat. He repeated it. Now Jamal Bowman is fighting for his political life because, he did something stupid. And I think the thing he did stupid was bend to them in the first place. Why are you going to criticize me? You don't even know me. Didn't even talk to me. Didn't talk to me. People were afraid in DC to rent my apartment. They were so afraid. And these are people who have been elected as leaders. So you're right that people are gullible, and people have accepted. I think people are already in the matrix. Now, what they want to do is put us into meta. They want to put us into a virtual world now. And pretty soon, if we allow them to have their way, everybody's going to be either on drugs or playing games in meta. And they will have complete run of the world. If you live in a tenement and it's filthy and it hasn't been cleaned up, the grass is growing outrageously high, and there's no public service whatsoever, you wouldn't know it because you're zonked out on drugs, or either you're in the virtual world. And that's where they want people.
I tell you, everything you're saying is just, we've talked about so much stuff, like up until this point, that's interconnected in so many different ways. And I never even thought about, just like we've talked about the economy, we've talked about corruption, we've just all these different aspects. and they sort of go back to like similar experiences, like this overall experience. But I think it's something you mentioned earlier. The strings is almost like you have to, whether you're tying the shoe up or untying the shoe, if you want to take your shoes off, there's a process involved. If you want to tie them up, there's a process involved. We have to do that with our thought process now. But while we're doing that, there's a constant reversal of our thoughts. And so we're constantly battling to do simple tasks. Things that should be simple are made even more difficult because the forces of the information out there are just so overwhelming. And I think there's just so
That's
much
right.
information overload. And
And that same lie is reinforced on many different levels. So you turn to your television for the news, which is supposed to be factual, and half of that is a lie in some way, shape, or form. You go for your entertainment, and half of that is a lie in some way, shape, or form because it has been shaped. So whether it's your entertainment world or your so-called real world, if you're relying on them, then you're being manipulated in one way or another. So now you go, okay, well, artificial intelligence. Well, I remind people that it's called artificial because it's artificial. And they call it intelligence, but it's not. It's not. Okay, so now, what is my point? If artificial intelligence is a collection of information that is available on the internet, what happens when you scrub the internet? So now you've scrubbed the internet, you've censored the internet, nothing is on the internet that's real, that's true, that's factual. What is artificial intelligence? It's the same as your computer program, garbage in and garbage out. It's just a fancier version. So I'm a Trekkie, right? Although I haven't looked at Star Trek in a long time now, but I'm a Trekkie. And the doctor, can't remember his name now, had the tricorder, and he could do that thing. He could wave it over the body, and then it would analyze, and it would say, okay, this is this, and this is what needs to happen. This is why this person is sick. So that means that all of that information had been preloaded into the tricorder. It's artificial intelligence. Now, suppose you load the wrong information into the tricorder. What's going to happen? You're going to get a wrong diagnosis and a wrong treatment plan. Well, that's what's happening now. We talked earlier about, well, you couldn't talk about COVID on YouTube. Okay, well, that means that all of those doctors that were taken off of YouTube because they challenged the narrative were taken off of YouTube. They're not in artificial intelligence, right? So I can't use artificial intelligence. It is artificial. People have to understand it. It's technology, but it's fallible. And it has been made fallible. So now what's the future of you and I are teachers? I'm a teacher now. But what's our future for our students if the students are using AI to write their papers and to gain quote unquote knowledge, and it's the wrong knowledge? It's not factual. It's made up facts. And suppose the teachers are not smart enough to understand that this is just a political tool. We're going to get to the book eventually. Just like COVID was a political tool, just like HIV was a political tool. So now, if the teacher doesn't know, the teacher can't correct the student. And what do you have? 2 generations that have been misinformed by those people who own all the strings. Because it's those people who own the strings are the same people who own the strings for your politicians. They own the strings for your actors. They own the strings for your professional athletes. What does what's his name? Travis Kelce do?
Pfizer.
That's right. They
I
own
was
the
just
strings.
I was going to mention that and talk about like the Super Bowls coming up, and then you have even the last few Super Bowls. You see one of the main sponsors is Pfizer. You have all types of Pfizer commercials doing the it's all together. You know,
That's
a
right.
sponsor. All this.
That's right.
The corporatism aspect of it is absolutely crazy. But
That's right.
I was gonna ask something. And we will talk about the book for sure. I guess my question or the thing that stood out to me the most reading your particular essay, I will say that some of the essays were almost like completely over my head when it came to, I would say I appreciate the way you kind of had a historical background into it. You talked about
Yeah.
Patrice Lumumba, and then you kind of
Yeah.
segued in a lot easier. Some of the other stuff was like, I'm not a damn biologist or anything. I don't know what the hell this is. I mean, which I understand you have no control of that. It was interesting, but it's like, oh my gosh, every essay is like so different, you know?
Yeah.
It just
Oh,
so many
and we
different
were
approaches.
talking about how we got those people together. So let's just go ahead and get started on the
Okay.
book. So I went to China and I led a delegation of people to China. I conceived of the trip as a result of the Trump administration and others talking about genocide in China.
The
So my
Uyghurs.
chapter is genocide. That's right, with the
Mm-hmm.
Uyghurs. And so we said, I said, well, I'm going to go to China and I'm going to see for myself what's going on, because that's the way I like to do things. And then on the Libya, when Obama was bombing and destroying Libya, I did the same thing. I invited a bunch of people to go with their cameras and just whatever you write, whatever you show is fine with me. Just, show the truth of what's happening there. So I did the same thing, except that Libya was pre my PhD. So during my PhD studies, what I realized is that if we wanted to solve the problems in the United States, I believe that breaking through these silos and connecting these isolated communities was the way to do that, the best way to do that. And then the best way to organize that would be to have one table in one room, in one building, just like those bad guys, but in one county, every county in the United States, we have our own set of people who come from the faux left to the extreme left to the extreme right to the, all across. And what is it that we can agree on? What are our problems, our common problems, and what are our common solutions? And then we fashion those solutions, and then we work together across all of those different divides. We work together to resolve those problems. So I call that a power cell. So I had decided that everything I did from now on was going to be a power cell. So that book, the book, How the U.S. Creates S-Hole Countries, that was one big power cell. There were people from the extreme right, people from the extreme left. That it didn't matter to me. Let's explore the concept of U.S. foreign policy as it relates to the conditions on the ground for other people in other countries. And so that book was a power cell. And then this exploration into China and the treatment of the Muslims in China was a power cell. And that's how, so we started that way. And I had communists, I had conservatives, I had everything in between. And we landed in Beijing in December after Christmas. So, it wasn't very long. And we landed in Beijing in 2019. And we left in shortly before the middle of January 2020. And we started in Beijing, from Beijing to Xi'an, Dunhuang along the Silk Road. And then we ended up in Urumqi, which is Xinjiang province, which is the capital city of the Uyghur Autonomous Project. And we stayed in Muslim-owned hotels. We lived in Muslim neighborhoods, all in every place. And so we kind of immersed ourselves in Muslim China. And we talked to people on the street. We just did that. We didn't have any interference from the Chinese government whatsoever. People say, yeah, you can't do that. Oh, yeah, we could. Yeah, we can. I did it again, too. I just did it a few months ago. You ought to try it before you express yourself. You ought to try doing something. So did that, and we paid our own way. But when we never went to Wuhan, we were immersed in the news in China, the English language news in China, but there was never any talk about any disease or any infection or anything like that. There was never any talk like that. So we had no idea what was going on. We were, trying to talk to Muslims in China. And then when we got back, and then China shut down, like about 5 days later, China shuts down completely. And then I said, I bet we were the last delegation of foreigners in China to get out. So then Italy shut down, then everybody was shutting down. And so I said, no, I can't do this book. I can't do that book. I got to do another book. And then that book was
When China
Sneezes. And then I used the same template of power cell, get people from every part of the political spectrum, because we have now discussed it ain't the way it used to be anyway. And so there is some area of common thinking, and we need to find that if we can. So that was what led me to get all of the different kind of people that were contributing to the book. And it turned out to be, I read every chapter, and I'm sorry that, I actually edited. So, I had to read, I had to read and reread and reread and reread. But basically that book represents the state of our knowledge about what was happening up to about June of 2020. So that was really the first book, but I wanted to look at it not as a medical book, but as a politics book, as a political book, because there was some politics going on. And, the doctors were fighting about whether viruses exist and they don't exist. And, there are many different fights that you can get into. I wanted to establish that this was a political act.
Mm-hmm.
And what we were witnessing involved our health, but it was around politics. It was governed by politics. And so that's why in the introduction, I wrote, our bloodstreams have now become a battlefield.
Mm-hmm. I tell you, reading your chapter in particular is well written, by the way. And
Oh,
I
thank
like
you.
it was, no, I liked it too because it wasn't that it was simplistic. It was just like the way it was written. I think it had more of a universal appeal to it because you had, if people wanted to know about Operation Northwoods, they could have the information.
Yes.
You use the example of Lumumba. You use the
Yes.
example of genocide against, African Americans.
Yes.
You talked about the pharmaceutical industry in general, but you also, to me, showed how, and honestly, this is the first, when COVID first started having this COVID mania stuff, my wife and I were deciding, like, are we going to get the vaccines, the quote unquote
Mm-hmm.
vaccines, and we were like saying to ourselves, like, we came to the conclusion, we're not under any circumstance going to let this shit touch our kids, that's one
Yes.
of the first things. But we had to talk about that as a family. She decided to get the first round of the quote unquote the vaccine, and myself, I decided to forego everything. I was like, what, I'm not doing any of it.
Yeah.
It was a personal choice. That's the way I always viewed it. But I always
Yeah.
I thought too, like, I was already asking questions. Okay, where did this come from? A lot of the
Right.
questions that you posed at the end,
Right.
I love the way you had all this series of questions at the end. And I'm thinking the same thing. This isn't a new thing either, because me, myself, as a Black person, having two
Right.
family members succumb to AIDS, I knew that
Uh-huh.
I'd seen this before, even though we're talking about 1988. I was born in 82. So AIDS to me
Mm.
was still something that was distant, but it was still personal enough to where I had that little bit of understanding of, okay, this is something that's already been done before. The way it was
Right.
mishandled, the way AIDS was
That's
mishandled
right.
at the end of the 70s and the 80s. Um,
Yeah.
so I like the way you made COVID-19 not a new concept, like, but the way the
Yeah.
mainstream media made it seem is like, oh my gosh, it's just like, this is unprecedented. Like, this has never
Right. But it's
happened.
not true. That
But you've
wasn't
cited
true.
the 1918 Spanish flu, you've cited MERS, you've
Yeah.
cited all these different viruses.
Yeah.
It's not like coronaviruses haven't existed. And so I love
Right.
that the way you kind of broke that down in the chapter.
Well, I'm glad that it resonated with you because I think what has made me persona non grata and the public enemy number one to the powerful lobby is my plain spokenness, that I can call a spade and you can pretty much know that that's a spade. and and so it, I think it's a gift, but it's a gift that is unwanted at this time, because either it's got to be so complex that, oh, you'd never be able to grasp this. Well, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you can. You can explain, if you understand something, you can explain it. In teaching. So the way I teach my students, because I don't consider myself a political scientist, and I tell them all, I'm an activist. I just happen to have a PhD, but I'm an activist. So I'm going to look at things as an activist.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I looked at it. And I felt about that the same way I felt about September 11th. I went through September 11th. I remember I was on the train at the Atlanta airport, going from concourse to concourse, you go into baggage claim. And I said, I said to myself, they lied. And this is an operation. Because in 2008, I was campaigning, you mentioned the Green Party nomination, and I was campaigning across the country. And I went to across the country, and I went to nightclubs. I went to clubs. I never go to clubs. I'm a nerd. I just, I'm dull and boring. uh and but it's good to do some people watching. And so I went to clubs, and I saw something that I had never seen before, which was this kind of, I can't explain it. I tell you where I was when I just realized, okay, this is not normal. I was in California, and I was at a it was an open air concert, and they had like 3 different stages. So one stage was this, and then you could go inside, like next to the stage, and then there was like drinks or whatever. And I went inside one of those stage areas, and there was some kind of pulsating. It was like this, boom, 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 boom. Now, I've been in nightclubs before, right? But I had never experienced that. And it wasn't, and the people inside there, they were saying, Obama, 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 Obama. I had never seen anything like that, and it was pulsating, and the music is really loud. And I said, oh, maybe that's the way young people party. Maybe that's the way young people party. But from what I know of intelligence operations, it was more like an intelligence operation. And I concluded that Obama's campaign was an intelligence operation. I had seen an intelligence operation before in a presidential campaign. I had seen that in, let me just look up quickly. When Sarkozy ran for president in France.
Is this something that you would want to share with the audience?
Yeah, okay. This is I'm just looking for the year.
Okay, I'll give you the ability if you want to share on your end. I'll let you share if you want to.
Oh, okay. No, I don't need to.
Okay.
Not this one anyway. Maybe something else. But so 2007, when Sarkozy first became president, I was in France, and I was I observed that campaign, and Sarkozy was everywhere. He was at the bus, his image was at the bus stop, in the bus terminal, on television, on the radio. He was everywhere. You couldn't pay for that. That was something else. That was an intelligence operation. And then after he was sworn in, the day after he was sworn in, they acknowledged that he was a Mossad agent. It was an intelligence operation. So France, the people of France had Sarkozy as their president, but he was an agent for another country. Okay. So then I experienced that. So then I go to this thing in California, and I said, oh, Obama is an intelligence, this is an intelligence operation. Let me, why I'm not surprised about Taylor Swift and the man showing his shoulder, and I just, because I've seen too many intelligence operations, and COVID was an intelligence operation. Now, of course, we know that because everything was conceived of by DARPA, by the Pentagon. It's a Pentagon operation. And then everything was thwarted. So when the Indian, so let me back up for just a minute. When France and some other countries helped China build the Wuhan Institute of Virology, but then after it was built, the Chinese said, we're so fortunate to have this institution. And now one of the first things we're going to study is HIV. Now imagine you've got some independent scientists. They're independent. They're paid by the People's Republic of China, and they're going to look into HIV. Do you think the United States wants that to happen? Heck no. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden, the United States is, crawling all over the WIV. And then the WIV is not even, when they are doing that, conducting the research for the United States, they're not even paying the Chinese scientists. The Chinese scientists, there's some paperwork that I came across. I was doing, so as a PhD, how you live your life doing research, right? And so I was researching, I was living this book and living this topic. And I found some document. There were lots of documents, but I found one that had the pay scale. And the memo, it was like a memo from EcoHealth Alliance, I think. And that memo was saying their scientists, their EcoHealth Alliance scientists were going to get time and a half, but the Chinese scientists were going to get half time. So those Chinese scientists weren't even paid, really for the work that they were doing. And that's probably because they really didn't want the Chinese scientists to know, unless they were their hand-picked Chinese scientists. So you can't say it's the Chinese virus, because in the first place, coronaviruses have been around ever since human beings have been around. So it's not that, but the spike protein is the bioweapon, and it's the spike protein that was making people sick. And it was the spike protein that they attached, or maybe not, if you don't believe that viruses exist, and it's a spike protein that is infecting people. And of course, by no accident, the Pfizer mRNA and the Moderna mRNA shots, what do they create? Spike protein in your body. They're not creating coronaviruses, they're creating spike protein. And people are now getting long COVID, which is just the COVID AIDS.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you explain that a little bit? You say COVID AIDS?
Yeah, AIDS, yeah. Because basically what has happened is they have damaged by taking the shot, and the more shots you have, the more damage your innate immune system becomes. And so their body, the mRNA is telling their body to manufacture more and more and more spike protein. Well, the spike protein is what actually is making you sick. And so you're manufacturing spike protein over and over and over again, and I guess until you die. Nobody knows.
So it's a slower like immunosuppression almost.
Yes, that's right. And so now the what they call COVID AIDS or they call long COVID is just COVID AIDS. It's the autoimmune
Acquired immune deficiency
deficiency
syndrome.
syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And so you are depressing your own immune system. And as a result of that, then you become victim to these more opportunistic infections, and your immune system is being depleted, and you're not doing anything because that spike protein is being manufactured in your body, and you're getting sicker and sicker, and you don't know why. So you don't have energy. You don't, there's what, the symptoms of the long COVID is you have no energy, you have difficulty breathing. Some people are losing their hearing, their sense of smell. And then, of course, you get COVID over and over and over again. So I just called my girlfriend the other day, and she's sick with COVID. And I had told her, well, unfortunately, I told her after she had taken the shot, don't take the shot. She took the shot and probably took a whole lot more because, people believe what people in white coats tell them. And so Dr. McCullough, Peter McCullough, sends out this thing talking about, he says something about medical science, not real science, or something like that. And I say, yeah, it's no, he said medical science, not what. Somehow he puts it. And my rejoinder to that was, yeah, but it was the political scientists that picked up the corruption of the medical industry and medical science long before the medical doctors did. So, because, if you live in it, those medical doctors use those protocols. They don't know where those protocols come from. One doctor gave me access to his up-to-date subscription, which is like very expensive. And but it's all of the research. So I just put in natural remedies, and I got so much information. It's there.
Mm-hmm.
That you can take the green tea, you can take, and the efficacy of certain juices if you freshly juice, particularly like beet juice and green juices and that sort of thing. And vitamins, vitamin D, efficacy in vitamin D. But, you couldn't even mention this stuff.
Mm-mm.
And so you would get kicked off of YouTube if you talked about vitamin C and vitamin D and going out and sitting in the sun for a couple of minutes or so, just so you could get your natural vitamin D going. And so anyway, I don't know how I got into all of that, but so I forgot how I got into all of that. The natural things that you could take.
No, I think it's because we had mentioned the shots and stuff, and
Oh gosh,
and
yeah.
and naturally, and then we also talked about the immunosuppression aspect of it. So it makes sense that
Yeah.
that would be the case. But
So you have Dr. Stella Emanuel. I love that woman, because in front of the Supreme Court, she challenged Fauci, and she said, I know you're taking hydroxychloroquine, and I challenge you to a urine test. And so, see, I was paying attention to all of this stuff that was going on. And that was during the time that I was doing the research for, I was talking about the research. And I was doing the research for my chapter. And so I wanted to be kind of plain spoken and tell a story that people could say, okay, well, I can understand that. It's not a medical book.
mm-hmm.
It's not a biology book. It really is a politics book. It's about the politics of disease. And now if you look at the practice of medicine in the United States, what you can see is that it really isn't about curing anybody or healing anybody. It's about maintaining a profit center. So cancer has become a profit center. Disease in general has become a profit center. And there's no healing that's going to take place. In fact, what you find out is that myocarditis is a side effect of, I wrote a paper for the side effects as well, on the side effects, observed side effects now of these Western shots. And myocarditis. So now we shouldn't be surprised when Pfizer says, oh, we're going to become the solution for myocarditis. And, that's what the game has been. And then I wouldn't be surprised if Pfizer is, a partner with McDonald's. So we're going to give you junk food, and then we're going to cause you to get ill. And then we're going to give you a medication. That medication puts you on like this hamster thing, where you're going round and round and round and round, because that medication is going to give you diabetes. So now you got to take the diabetes medicine. Oh, and by the way, it also negatively affects your kidney. So now you got to take some kidney medication. You're taking medication for kidney. You're taking medication for diabetes. You're taking medication for, and all you really needed to do was just slow down and make sure that your vitamin intake was good, and stay away from the Coca-Cola and the fake sugars, and use honey. And then now, of course, I've got that Lohan Guo, which is the monk fruit as a sweetener if you have to have sweet. But what I did was I went on a Ramadan fast. I did a solidarity fast, and this was several years ago. And so I said, okay, my Ramadan fast is going to be like an extended Lent, and I'm going to give up sugar. I gave up sugar. I was looking at labels. If it had sugar in it, I didn't take it. And what I realized is I didn't need sugar. I did not need to have sugar. And this idea that it needs to be sweet, well, we don't really have to have it sweet. And then if we do have it, it doesn't have to be sugar. It can be, so I eat a fresh mango. I'm in a part of the world now where I can have mango during mango. Oh, that's the other thing. Mango season. Oh my gosh. People in the United States think they can have mangoes any time of the year. They can have any kind of fruit any time of the year. No, you have seasons. And so anyway, if you get back to a natural, whole food, healthy kind of lifestyle, then, with some body movement, then you're not so afflicted by these other things. So anyway, I read every research paper there was.
I could tell.
In preparation for to do the chapter, right? And then I found, it was like a paper chase. I had to hunt down documents. And so I show you that letter from the president. I opened the chapter with that letter because I wanted people to understand why Trump might have, I can't, since I'm not in their brain, I don't know how they think, but why Trump might have taken this with a grain of salt in the beginning was because he had read, everybody knows Trump clicks around, like George Bush said, he clicks around on the internet. Trump clicked around on the internet and was all over the internet. And you couldn't look at what was happening with these shutdowns and all of that and not read the Indian research paper where the Indian scientists said that there were 4 HIV inserts in the spike protein. Trump read that. And then he wrote to the executive person in the in the office of the presidency and said, get to the bottom of this. What is this about 4 HIV inserts being in the spike protein in this COVID? And that let me know Trump knew. Trump knew. I don't know how much he knew, but he knew that something wasn't right about this.
So
This
why
was
did
not a natural occurrence.
so why did he do all the posturing and get the shots anyway and rile up the base and all that stuff? I mean,
I
that's
think Pfizer gave him, I can't remember the amount. I think it was $50,000 or something. But Pfizer gave the presidential transition team
$1 million, I
a,
think, is what somebody told me on the forum.
okay, yeah, okay. Then let me just look.
Yeah, Hashaki
Pfizer,
Nichols, who is
Trump.
part of the Redemption Party, she's actually from the state of Georgia too. Black
Uh-huh.
woman that's she's a vice presidential candidate running under the Redemption Party banner for president of the United States this 2024 cycle. And she's been on the forum a couple of times. I think I remember her citing the Trump team getting paid $1 million by Pfizer. Um, when we were talking, that kind of just came up in conversation.
Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to see how much. Let me see. It was a substantial amount, but I don't know if this is a Hill. That's a general. That's sort of a general thing, and it doesn't mention Pfizer.
But it was all, but it kind of goes to your point about it being a political tool anyway, because I mean, we know that the whole idea of just the history of developing vaccines. We know that there's a long documented history with this, and you also had the political ploy with the debates. The cycle was going on, and there was a rush to be like, "Hey, I'm going to get credit for saving the population
Yeah.
because my
Yeah.
name
Let
is
me
on
see.
this. There was just so much that went on during that time frame, it seems.
Yeah. I'd have to track the exact amount down, but it was a substantial amount of money. And they gave Trump the transition team got that, I think that they supported the inaugural ball and all of that, and so Trump got that money. And Trump, because RFK Jr. said that Trump had talked to him about being some kind of healthcare czar or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that donation came in, it didn't happen. Oh, wait a minute. I'm looking. See here. Let me do this because I think something changed. Okay, so yeah, so Trump got the donation and then Trump changed. And as a result, Operation Warp Speed came and, sort of legitimized all of that. So, there are a lot of people who would like to ignore the fact or forget the fact that Trump is part and parcel of the problem when it comes to COVID. But no, he's not. He is a part of the problem. And you can't ignore that.
And it shows you also how much power the system has, because I know as much
That's
as
right.
of a lot as much as these Trump supporters, and I know a lot of them, they come to me a lot, and we have great conversation. Shout out to everyone that supports Kiko's Freethinkers Forum. Again, I know we have a lot of support from different ideologies, and I know quite a few Trump supporters that follow the channel. They tell me that they follow the channel because they see me as like, I mean, I am an independent minded person, so that's fine. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
have Trump derangement syndrome like a lot of my liberal friends. I mean, it's just like they can't sleep at night because of Trump. I'm just like, well, it sounds like your problem, not mine, because I
Right.
sleep just
Yeah.
fine. I ain't got no fucking. I'm just like, really? Like, why are you losing valuable sleep over one person? You know what I mean? Doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense at
Yeah.
all. But you can't tell people how to think. I guess they had to come to their own conclusions at some point. But
Yeah. So I did a lot of, let me tell you something else that happened that's kind of buried in that chapter, but I think is politically significant. And that is the Obama administration wrote a memo to the transition team. And now this is a problem. This became a problem because Trump had neophytes surrounding him, people who were totally unprepared for the positions that he put them in, to be quite frank. And you had a lot of peacocks and nobody who really understood that this was very serious. This is very serious business, the office of the presidency. And so this memo that had been written by the Obama administration for the transition team specified that no anti-malarial drugs would be taken for the next pandemic. So they had already decided. So that policy decision was from the Obama administration. Well, who was present in the Obama administration and the Trump administration? Fauci.
Of course.
So that's why Stella said Dr. Stella challenged Fauci to the urine test because she knew he was taking the anti-malarial. What's the anti-malarial? Hydroxychloroquine and zinc.
Mm-hmm.
She knew. And so, thank goodness I had a doctor who was there with Dr. Stella in front of the Supreme Court at the same time. And that doctor wrote the postscript to my chapter. Mm-hmm. And so that postscript is telling people you need to be taking hydroxychloroquine and black seed oil and, all of the things, vitamin C and everything that we knew at that time. It's sort of like in that postscript. And I have been taking hydroxychloroquine ever since.
But see, what you just mentioned is this is the seed that I've planted in the head of people who are just, they fall in love with these figures, whether they're Bernie, Trump, Javier Milei, just all these figureheads just constantly in our faces. Personalities, they're media personalities. And I was talking to S.L. Campton, who has come on the show quite a few times, and I was telling him, I understand that people have a lot of passion for Trump and a lot of hate towards it. I mean, that's how this world is now when it comes to politics. It's a game where, if someone hates you, someone absolutely loves you. I mean, you can spin it, you can spin the ball to whatever way you want to spin it. But I just like to tell people, and a lot of these supporters of these candidates, I'm just saying, I have no horse in this race, but I just want to tell you that your guy that you kiss his ass constantly, but he had a chance to fire the same person. You're talking about fire Fauci. Why didn't he fire Fauci? He had every opportunity to do these things.
Right.
And that's why I'm just like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, so what does that tell me about him if it's under his watch, even though his supporters are saying one thing, but he's doing completely different things?
He did completely different things. So, I started out talking about the system is rigged. Well, I expected him to unrig the system because, the system is rigged. Drain the swamp. Well, I expected him to drain the swamp, but what he did was he went in and got swamp monsters. I even put on my Twitter, I said, okay, you have this affinity for generals, okay, because you never served in any military. So, okay, that's fine. I can give you some generals who have been in the swamp. They understand the swamp and they survived with their values and their morals intact, like Taguba is one of them. And I said, okay, then nominate that general. I put every time there was a position available, I put a swamp warrior is what I call them. I put a swamp warrior as a suggestion. course. No. And then he goes and gets the ultimate swamp, is John Bolton and
Oh gosh.
Elliot Abrams. I
Horrible,
mean,
horrible
it
people.
yeah, it was horrible. And then the other thing is that I worked with some African Americans to actually come up with policies because, I'm not about, see, the Democrats are, in my opinion, the Democrats are about a political exchange. You give me your vote, I'll give you some dollars on election day. But the day after election day, don't ask me about policy. So I wanted to respect the Black electorate by offering policies. And wasn't really my idea, but it was my idea that we need to offer policy instead of, get out the vote. And I think that if you talk about policies, people will be attracted to your campaign, and then you will garner support as a result of talking proper public policy. So I was asked to join this group. I joined the group, and we came up with kind of like, you could call it a Black manifesto. My dad had me write a Black manifesto when I was in the Georgia legislature. My dad would make a suggestion. He'd say, Cynthia, we need a Black manifesto. Then I know that the we means me. I got to write it. And so I did that when I was in the Georgia legislature with my dad. So I said, okay, well, I kind of know how to do that. So we'll put something together for the Black community. And then we will present it to Donald Trump's, to the office of the presidency. So we did that. And the document that we put together was really very well received. We had, I was a contributor. We had a member of the Black Panther Party who was a contributor, so, and then we had some activists who were contributors, and it was a pretty good multi-generational group. And then the time came to present it. They presented it, not me, but the originator of the idea presented it, and it was very well received. The next step for this document was to go to the next person who was going to decide on it. Well, guess who that was? Jared Kushner. So Jared Kushner took the document, turned it into the so-called platinum plan that he couldn't even explain because he didn't really care about it. And that platinum plan went nowhere because it was just a publicity stunt. What my little group did was not a publicity stunt. It was our heart that went into that document, because we know our community and we know what our community needs in order to thrive, and it was solutions. Well, at any rate, that was sort of like a double, how can I say, double stab in the back, because even though I understand politics, but that Trump never got a chance to see it, because Jared Kushner took it, modified it in some way. I guess he was talking to Ice Cube. And so he and Ice Cube modified that document that we put together. And Ice Cube had another professor from, I think, Kentucky, who was talking to him. And
Derek Hamilton.
And so then that, whatever it was, it became nothing because Jared Kushner couldn't even explain what it was. And it went nowhere. It was just a publicity stunt. And that kind of denigration, I'm not going to tolerate that. So that was the end of that. And that was, I became very anti-Trump, because you don't ask for something And well, it's plagiarism. Plagiarism has been in the news lately with Miss Gay. So what Jared Kushner did was plagiarize the work of some activists on one side and the professor on the other side, and produce a document that he couldn't explain. It's plagiarism. And that is an academic crime.
To the highest
But, you
degree,
know,
absolutely.
since he never saw academia, you know, he was able to buy his academia. That's part of the problem at Harvard too, is that after Sumner got there, you know, it just became, anybody could go to Harvard. You just buy it or you're part of the club.
I tell you, going back a little bit to your chapter 11, there were two significant, the whole chapter, like I said, I recommend my audience go get this book, When China Sneezes, From the Coronavirus Lockdown to the Global Politico-Economic Crisis, edited by Cynthia McKinney. Cynthia McKinney contributes to the book, and there's just so many different types of authors and styles and philosophies, and different angles towards the COVID lockdowns and everything else. And the medical industry. This citation that you had in your chapter, the pharmaceutical industry is the largest campaign donor to politicians and the largest advertiser in all forms of media per 2018. And then you also pointed out the fact that there's no patient zero or ground zero, which is always, we can't point to, there's no phase 2 COVID-19. All we have is speculation. That's all we have. That's really. Right. And I think it's weird. We're 6 years in and we still.
That's right. And nobody's even asking the question, but I can tell you one great investigative journalist, his name is George Webb.
Oh, yes, I know George Webb. I know of him, yeah.
Yeah, he thinks that he can name and put a face to patient zero.
Really?
But it's not who you think it is, because it goes back to the military operation. COVID was a military operation, and we see that it achieved several goals that have been set, and these are global. So can a group of people shut down the world? Yes, they can. Can a small group of people shut down the world? Yes, they can. Can a small group of people incite so much fear in the global population that they will make them take an injection that they don't know what's in it? Yes, they can. And they did. It was an experiment, a gross experiment. And as far as I'm concerned, it worked and humanity failed.
And that goes to the idea of biological warfare that you brought up in the book. How would you define that to my audience within the context of your chapter 11, biological warfare?
Well, I actually, now I might want to show this because it is so significant in my opinion. Okay. Let me see if I can find it. Rebuilding America's Defense. Let me see if I can find this document.
Oh, and while you're finding it, I'm just curious, how would you compare the reception of what was the atmosphere like in Bangladesh when COVID was happening? How was the government's response and the local national government's response compared to what was happening all over the world, the Western countries especially?
Well, now here's the thing. I actually was in the US during the lockdowns, and I only 2020 was when the lockdown started, and we just got out of China, and I went back to the US. I could not go because of the lockdowns. I couldn't go back to Bangladesh. So I was basically locked out of Bangladesh, but a lot of the ivermectin studies that have been done were done here in Bangladesh. Okay, let me get this, see if I can pull this up.
Yeah, I noticed that was a big thing too. It's like there was a blackout on the way the virus was received in Africa, the Middle East, Asia. It's all the focus was like on Italy, Western Europe. I mean, the US. I mean,
Yeah,
it was very clear like what was going on or whatever. It's like, oh, what's going on in Asia and Africa then? It's like all you're talking about is it not affecting those
yeah.
areas either? And if so, like why isn't it affecting it the same way? Like what's the reason behind it?
Right. And so, and that's because, if you want to kill Arabs, then you use the spike protein that's attached to MERS. If you want to kill East Asians, then you use the spike protein that's attached to SARS. If you want to kill Europeans, then you use the spike. Well, you can kill a lot of people with the COVID spike protein. I mean,
Mm.
that's just a simple thing. If you want to kill kind of like everybody.
But it's
Now,
something, but it's
the
something to your
Africans,
book. I just wanted to make this brief mention. When China sneezes is the title of the book, but it's still so weird that our focus hasn't really been a lot on China. You would think that that's where ground zero is. So that begs the question: we obviously don't believe that ground zero is necessarily China. It could be
they
somewhere else.
don't want anybody to answer this question. I mean, this is kind of like fundamental, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know, so what they did was, they said, well, I had been to China and I had seen the what they call the wet markets. Well, in the third world, every market is a wet market. It's just, you go to Africa, it's a quote unquote wet market. Um, and so in China, they wanted us to believe that a woman ate some soup, some bat soup, and then that's how, it's just crazy. And the ignorance of people in the United States, well, they would believe that.
Mm-hmm.
They would believe that. How many people are going to spend their last dime to go to China to find out anything?
Mm-hmm.
Or spend their last dime to go anywhere, to go to Libya, go somewhere, go, Um, in Africa, oh my gosh, the push against African fertility should be, it's a crime. And if I were an African person, I mean, I just don't, I don't understand. I do understand because these people are greedy and they have no accountability and they're chasing after these Federal Reserve notes because the Federal Reserve note is fake, but then the euro is fake too. So if they want to stash a hoard of euros, that's fake money from the private international bankers as well. And so these African despots are kept in place and the African people are hurting. Oh my gosh, it just hurts me. It just hurts me. It just hurts me so much. I cannot stand, the kids are so cute and the kids are dancing and there's one group of them that has just taken the internet by storm.
Mm-hmm.
But the conditions in which they live, it's just sickening to me. So I just keep it. I just keep it. I can express myself very well in my classroom. And that's where I do. But anyway, if I can share the screen,
Mm-hmm.
I want to show, yeah, here we go. Right here. I want to share this. So what you see now in the highlighted part, do you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is and oh, I should say, oh gosh. Now I have to go so I can show the beginning. So I want to show the title of the document. Let me just go to the top. Rebuilding America's Defenses. This is written by an organization that has since changed its name. I think now it's the Center for Democracy or something like that. They changed their name, but it's the same people. and Rebuilding America's Defenses. And it's written by the Project for a New American Century. These are the people who really, really run the show. And the Kagans. You want to find something bad, look to Victoria Nuland, but she's the wife of Kagan, and it's a bunch of Kagans.
Elena
I don't know
Kagan?
if she's a wife of this one. Yeah. And but these guys, they basically, that family runs the show. So now we're going to page 60. This is very important. Page 60. And people should never forget this, because this was the beginning. This is them. And see, you got to pay attention to what these people write, because they're telling you what they're going to do. Here we are, 55. Here we go. So now here we are. And what does it say? It says, and advanced forms of biological warfare that can target specific genotypes may transform biological warfare from the realm of terror to a politically useful tool. The spike protein is a politically useful tool. If you go and you study, you will find that not everyone is harmed by the spike protein. And I can go to the study. Actually, I was the one that found the study, because I read every study and I was spreading the information. As you know, I was spreading it to anybody who would listen to it. And Lee Merritt listened to it. Another person who listened to it, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Lee Merritt. She calls herself the medical rebel, and that she has become. I don't know how long she was, because she worked at the Pentagon. But now she is definitely one of us. She is a rebel. And the other one, RFK Jr. RFK Jr. is the one who really articulated it on a wider platform. But Ashkenazi Jews are not harmed by this spike protein.
Really?
Yeah. You didn't know that?
No, I did not. I'm not afraid to say that I didn't know the answer to that. I just that's kind of like why these conversations are so important, because you learn smaller bits of information that grow into something that's a more cohesive importance. But then you learn just like zingers like this one. I had no clue whatsoever, because like I said, information overload at some point. And I've said this on the forum too, just like with anything, like I understand that there's a deep state. Like I don't have to be convinced anymore. Like I've known this for a while, because my dad has told me all about this and how this game works out. But it's kind of like, for me, not you necessarily, and not, there's some great people that published and did some great research on COVID and the continuous effects of the economy, how it was basically like the largest transfer of wealth in history, and it affected people in so many different ways. But I feel like for some people, COVID was, it's like they're still talking about it, but they're not educating people in a way that's going to like make people like consider like, hey, let's not let's avoid this from happening again. This thought process of this echo chamberization of people, putting them in boxes. I feel like some people are almost making a career out of like COVID-19. It's like it's become their number one focus is the pandemic. It's like, and I'm saying, like, how much longer are they going to keep talking about the pandemic? But are they going to wait till the next one happens? And that's probably why things like that, I lose sight of important statistics like that and statements like that, because at some point I was like, okay, there's other stuff going on. And I understand. I have a lot of friends. That's kind of like their main thing is talking about the weaponization of COVID. Okay, sure, that's one thing, but that's all. This is part of a bigger picture too. What's going to happen next after this? Because we know that something else is happening down the pipeline. It might be another virus, it might be something else, but an alarming statement because and there was a lot of talk about Israel within the context of COVID too. I noticed too. There was a lot of studies. I heard Israel come up a lot in the media, but
Just
maybe you can probably allude to that too. Those studies coming out of Israel.
let's see.
Repeated a conspiracy theory that the virus was
Mm.
targeted against certain groups while sparing Jewish and Chinese people. Multiple prominent Democrats condemned those remarks. The
I remember this.
committee described them as
Okay, so they can condemn the remarks, but they can't condemn the science.
Mm-hmm.
So let me see if I can find the actual study. I posted it several times on my Twitter. Let me see.
And then this is also another thing. There's so many different trajectories and that really throws people off the loop because on one hand you have RFK he's been, I guess, this medical, he's done this for a long time. He's talked about the environment, talked about the medical industry and the deficiencies and the corruption and everything else. But then it's like the same people who are tied into this that you just mentioned, like he's compromised, obviously, he's clearly compromised. I mean, his positions now, I mean, with the AIPAC stuff and everything else. I mean, this rabbi guy is always with him, it seems.
Yeah,
He's all
make
over
sure
the media.
that's making sure he says the right thing. He can't let me see. So it's one of these studies that's talking about ACE2 because you see certain people don't have ACE2 and some people have a lot of it. And there's a no, that's not, it's one of these studies. You see, I've got them all, I've
Oh
got
my
them all
gosh.
here. And I'm trying to see what's probably the easiest way I could find this. Oh, wait a minute. This is one of the studies. But there's one that has that's TMPRS2. Let me see. Let's see if it's this one. Yeah, this is it. Now where is it? Okay, here we go. Can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow. I can see that. That's crazy.
So it's the K26R Ashkenazi Jew. Now that is a subpopulation of all Ashkenazi Jews. So this particular subpopulation, the K26R Jew, Ashkenazi Jew, had zero uptake of the spike protein.
Mm.
This is a study that came out. Let me see when it came out. 2020, December 2020.
Oh my gosh, so right on the cusp of everything.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that's why RFK Jr. said what he said, because someone showed him this study and these results.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. Now your audience is seeing it. It's
Mm-hmm.
there. So yeah, you know, you can't say, well,
And you can't say that
that's
that's
what.
not a credible journal. I mean, that's a clearly.
No,
Mm-hmm.
and I can take you through all of these, that have some aspect of this racial specificity
Mm-hmm.
of the spike protein. So let me stop sharing.
This is really a scary moment because when I was reading that part, when you talked about genocide, I mean, clearly what comes to mind is, the positivism. You mentioned that. You mentioned the scientific determinism and all the racial science that was thrown
Mm-hmm,
in at the end of the
mm-hmm,
19th
mm-hmm.
century. And
Yeah.
they use that to justify eugenics projects all over the world.
Yes.
And during World
Yes.
War II and World War One, that
Yes.
30-year period,
Yes.
this was a commonplace mindset, to
That's right.
to
That
sterilize
was it was
entire
so
populations.
commonplace that the university's research dollars went into eugenics. It was not just it was fashionable. It was not just popular. It was the higher level thinking, the highest level funding for that research was around eugenics.
Mm-hmm.
So again, who decides who gets those dollars? The people who create the dollars or the pounds or the
Mm-hmm.
euros.
Yeah, I tell you, I want to there's so much more we can talk about now, but I say we leave it here because I know you have other places to go, and
Yes.
and I definitely want you to come back onto the show. And I know my audience will be super thrilled to have you back on. But this, I believe, was a wonderful episode 95. I learned a lot myself. And I'm just like, wow, some of the stuff you said, it did just so much. That's the thing about it. When you learn like newly acquired information, it's almost like you just go start back from scratch again. It's like, damn, I gotta consider
I
this
know.
now. I gotta consider this
I
now.
know.
I'm taking
I
notes the whole
know.
time when you talk.
I know. And you know what? Here's the other thing. And then yeah, we can wrap it up. But when I came here to teach, I got a kind of culture shock, but it wasn't the kind of culture shock that one would expect, because it was like belief systems that have been created for us that basically brainwash us. So I break my students down into groups, or I let them form their own group. And this is my very first semester teaching. And one of the groups called themselves the Hitlerites. Now, where I come from, you're supposed to be afraid to even mention that name. You can't talk about Hitler. And you certainly wouldn't want to call yourself Hitler, right? But in this part of the world, the freedom fighters were allied with Germany because who were the oppressors? The colonizers.
Mm,
I'm in a different part of the world.
mm-hmm.
Their understanding is completely different. And for me, that has caused me to open my eyes. My eyes are wide open now. Not with judgment, but just to absorb and understand how truly rigged my value system and my historical knowledge has been.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a proper conclusion. But I also want to give you a chance to, if you have any direct messages of encouragement or a final message that you want to add into that conclusive statement that you just made, and maybe how an audience member, if they had a question or a comment, what would be the quickest way to get in contact with you, Dr. McKinney?
Maybe next time I come on your show, we can take questions.
Oh, wow, that'd be fun.
Yeah, so
That'd be
let's
a lot of
just
fun.
organize it so that people say, okay, well, I got this question. And either they send the questions to you in advance and we just do a show of question and answer, or they can ask them live, depending on, you know, what kind of how we sort of organize the platform. But I'll do that. I'll answer their questions with you.
That'd be perfect too. That sounds fine with me. That works well with me. That'd be a one. I think I've done it once before, and that's it. But I'm open to doing that for sure. I think my audience would have a lot of fun being able to have that
Okay,
interactive
yeah.
component with
Let's
it.
have some fun. Yeah.
No doubt. But not to say that this wasn't fun because I enjoyed this episode 95. And Dr. McKinney, I just want to say again from Kiko's Freethinkers Forum to you, I enjoyed this conversation. I felt like we were like old friends, kind of catching up,
That's
talking.
right.
And I can't wait to talk to you again soon. And cheers, beautiful people. Enjoy the rest of your day. And also, Dr. McKinney, you have a wonderful day yourself. And best of luck with all your research and your teaching. And we will talk soon. Cheers, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.